we got this saying in Romania that the mother of morons is always pregnant. And you can definitely tell how accurate the saying is by the high number of communists on Twitter, which are arguing with people who actually benefited from the communism under the Iron Curtain. And every now and then you're going to see an individual that is going to shame people from Eastern Europe, saying that, well, if your father was actually persecuted by the communist regime, he must have deserved it. I love how communists believe that the government becomes God. And God can do no evil. Like, God is always good and just. So when you have this lady saying that communists literally threw my dad, who for the record was not bourgeoisie or anything like that, into a labor camp, I did not see so many, well, he probably deserved it, in the comment section. Apparently the reason he was persecuted was for political beliefs. He didn't think that the communists are good people, and he was a writer, so this is why he was imprisoned. And again, a communist prison is very bad. Last time an American was thrown into something similar, as far as I know, was that baseball lady that got thrown into a prison in Russia because they found her with marijuana. And the Biden administration decided to trade her in exchange for Victor Bout. I mean, this is how they realize, well, you know, like, she can't suffer this much into a Russian prison, which again is not a communist prison, but I think is the closest as you can get nowadays. So it is inhumane, right? But what I find it fascinating is the people that are simping for communism, they do not understand what communism did in Eastern Europe. I mean, let's just look at a couple of things, right? In Romania, what did they do? Banned abortions. It's not just like they banned abortions, they banned contraceptives as well. They would actively have doctors go to schools when women reached the age, I believe it was like 13 or 14 years old, and then they would perform annual checkups on them to see if they didn't get pregnant. And once the women would go to work in certain factories, they would have doctors there that would start to investigate them. And what's interesting, like, there's documentaries about this. Like, you can ask Eastern European people that have lived through the timeline. The women were traumatized. Like, imagine you're 14 years old. In most cases, they didn't even know what sex was. We didn't have sex ed in school. But they didn't know what sex is. And all of a sudden, this doctor wants to look at their vagina. Like, can you imagine the psychological stress? And again, like, the doctor wasn't hired by the patient, so he had absolutely no responsibility in behaving nice with the patient. He was hired by the government, by the state. So he had no responsibility in order to treat these ladies nice. In fact, all doctors were like that because while we did have public health care, to the point where whenever you needed it, they didn't have stuff to heal you with. Like, they would run out. Like, oh, we ran out of syringes. We ran out of aspirin. We ran out of this. We ran out of that. But you didn't have any sort of private healthcare, right? Because, like, even in the modern countries where you have public healthcare, you also have a private system, so that if you can't find what you need in the public sector, you go to the private sector. They wouldn't have that here. And you couldn't just go, oh, I want to go to France in order to get the surgery that I can't get in Romania. No, because the borders were closed. Again, a lot of people who are saying that communism was so good, and I have seen people who say that communism is good now in North Korea. I actually argued with one of these brainlets. They don't wonder, it's like, okay, well, if it's so good, why are the borders closed? Like, a fence that keeps people outside is a fence that tells you that a property is there, right? So it marks a property. A fence that keeps people in, it marks a prison. That was the issue. Like, if communism was so good, the way you can demonstrably and objectively point out that it wasn't is to say, well, why were people being kept in then? Because if something is good, then more people want to come in. Why weren't people from the United States wanting to come to Eastern Europe then? Why weren't people from West Germany trying to smuggle themselves into East Germany? Right? So, for some reason, they don't answer these questions. So let's look at communism so far, right? Banning abortions, strong border control. I mean, they would shoot you. They would shoot you if you try to leave the border. And then you also have severe restriction on LGBT rights. And we're not talking about like what you hear in Russia now, or in Hungary. Oh my God, Viktor Orban is anti-gay because he doesn't allow queer theory to be taught in universities. No. Like in Romania, under the communist regime, under Ceausescu, if they found out that you had gay sex, they would lock you in prison. It was a crime. And even after the regime fell, for a while they maintained that criminalized under the penal code. And when the European Union, the Council of Europe, said, look, if you guys want to join us, you got to fix this, what the Romanians did is they took out the crime of homosexuality from the penal code and they put it under rape. So like rape was the unconsensual act of sex between two people, or the consensual act of sex between two individuals of the same sex. And it was like that for a couple more years until it was finally eradicated. And you see, like, on Twitter, all these people that have, like, various LGBT paraphernalia in their bio, right? And they're supporting these regimes. It's mind-boggling. I genuinely, like, do not understand how it can happen. Every single socialist regime throughout the history of mankind, except for one, but everyone else, they were persecuting gay people. Without exception. And they will say, oh, the Nazis, yeah, the Nazis did it as well. But they never mentioned that the communists also did it. The only regime that didn't is the one from East Germany. Like, please let me know if there's anyone else that didn't lock up gay people. That was a communist or a socialist regime. You may say that China, I guess they don't, but are they really communist? They're communist in name only, aren't they? No, the reason for this is because they wanted to encourage high birth rates. Like, they thought that if the Cold War ever gets hot, then they're going to need a lot of people. So they encourage the family unit. They encourage having many children in order to also develop the economy of the country. Like, literally, the communists from Romania would be considered, unironically, far right. Like Donald Trump would look like a far leftist from the perspective of the communists in Romania, socially speaking. Economically, they were definitely left-leaning. And economically, they were disastrous. But politically and socially, they were far right to the extreme. So, yeah, I mean, seeing leftists who believe it's like, oh, well, your father deserved to be persecuted. I'm really curious if a person would say, yeah, well, he got locked up because he's gay. I'm really curious what they would say then. Because someone must have had a father like that. I remember, like, one of the biggest, like when I was at law school, we actually studied the Garden of Happiness, it was called. They found out that some politicians, as well as some higher-ups, like high individuals, would meet in a park. And they were all gay, and they were organizing private meetings. And the Secret Service police, they figured that out, and they went down the line and arrested them. But this is like, you know what would happen in a communist country? That I see people on Twitter cheering and saying that, well, it's actually a good thing that it did happen. So bizarre, you know? And you have people that live there, or had parents that lived there, and they talk to them. And when they go on Twitter, instead of listening, no, they know better. So, like, now the mentality in the United States is like this, right? If you're a woman and you speak about your lived experiences, you're qualified to do so. If you're a black person and you speak about your lived experiences, you're qualified to speak on behalf of all of black people. If you're a person that literally lived under communism, or had parents that talk to you constantly about how it was to live under communism, the fuck do you know? The American knows better. Interesting. Let me know what you guys think, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.